Analu Bambirra, who with Mahasen Nasser Eldin authored a paper, Decolonial Aesthetics and Praxis in Palestine and Brazil. I want to invite, as Analu Bambirra comes forward, I'll share a little about her. Analu Bambirra, Ana Luisa Bambirra Alves, Brazilian, holds a degree in film and audiovisual from Centro Universitario UNE in Belo Horizonte, Brazil. Partner at Partisane Filmes, she works in the fields of executive production, festival curation, and short film distribution. She worked for Ana Villana production company from 2014 to 2022 as an assistant executive producer, and currently works for Ocean Films production company as a project manager. She is the curator, director, and producer of the Arab Women's Film Festival in Brazil. Very welcome, Analu Bambirra, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Hello, good morning. So I am Analu Bambirra. I co-wrote this paper with Mahasen Nasser Eldin. We made this paper as a dialogue between Palestine and Brazil through cinema. Unfortunately, Mahasen couldn't attend, so I hope I'll be good to represent her as well. So this paper is a dialogue. We chose two films, a Palestinian and a Brazilian film, to represent what we're going to talk about, which is fabulation through cinema and the colonial praxis. The two films are Your Father Was Born 100 Years Old, and So Was the Nakba by Razan al-Salah, and It's Never Nighttime in the Map by Ernesto de Carvalho. So why Palestine and Brazil? There is a quote that I would like to start with, which is this one. The colonial liberation implies epistemic disobedience. And both cinematographies, Palestinian and Brazilian, they embrace fabulation and revisiting hegemonic narratives through cinema, and it is as we revisit colonialism, we practice epistemic disobedience. And also, besides the fabulation, the land expropriation is a shared reality between both countries. While Palestine suffered from Zionism and the military occupation, Brazilian people, especially black and indigenous populations, are murdered by the local police, a police force that is trained and receives weapons by the Israeli forces through a cooperation deal signed in 2019. We're going to talk in the end about the colonial cracks. I'll leave this to the end, but it is also a reason why we are establishing this dialogue between both countries. This is not a historical paper, but we need to go through very quickly through history. I'll go very quickly through Palestine, and then we're going to talk about Brazil. In Palestine, we start with Napoleon's letter in 1799. This letter, regardless of the intent of Napoleon's letter, it was very important for the Zionist, for the Zionist movement. This publicity was what matters. In 1840, the British got interested in the Jewish state. The interest was in a buffer state for reckoning neighboring countries, especially Egypt. And it's important to highlight that in 1907, the Jewish National Fund was established, in which it expelled Palestinian farmers from their lands and gave them to Jewish people. It's a strong pillar of Zionism and the settlement colonialism in Palestine. In 1916, the Sykes-Picot Agreement put Palestine under the influence of the British, and the colonization of Palestine started in December 1917, after the Balfour Declaration. The Palestinians were aware of the increase of the Zionist movement, and there were big responses to it. The 1929 Burak uprising and the 1936 striking revolt are pivotal points in the history of the protest in Palestine. In 1948, the Nakba happened, and it's important to highlight that the Nakba is an ongoing project. The expel of the Nakba is an ongoing project, as we see until nowadays. The Zionist project still happening with bombings and attacks in Jenin and Gaza. The filmmaker that we chose for this paper was Razan al-Salah. She's a third-generation Palestinian whose family was expelled from Haifa in 1948. Her family fled to Beirut, where she was born and where she grew up during post-war Lebanon. She, like the rest of 7.2 million Palestinian refugees in the world today, is not recognized by the colonial state of Israel and is denied the right of return to Palestine. Al-Salah is currently based in Montreal, Canada. And now, Brazil. The territory dispute is very systemic in Brazilian history. Nowadays, currently we are facing the voting of Marco Temporal, which says that indigenous populations have the right of demarc their lands if they were occupying these lands in 1988 onwards. It's a big violence towards the indigenous population because Portugal invaded Brazil in 1500s. So the Marco Temporal denies centuries of violence against indigenous populations in the country. So Brazil was invaded by Portugal in the 1500s, and then there was this attempt of genocide against indigenous populations and slavery of indigenous populations, followed by the kidnapping and slavery of Africans. We hosted centuries of slavery trade in Brazil. In the year that the first law against slavery trade was signed and created, the elite decided to create the Lei das Terras, the lands law. It was a tool to prevent former slaves from having their own lands. It said that it would be illegal to occupy any lands in the country. Therefore, indigenous populations, Africans and even poor European immigrants wouldn't be allowed to have any lands. They knew at some point the slavery trade would be abolished, so this was intentional as a tool to prevent them. Then in the late 1800s, there was the end of the slavery trade. There was a republic, and without this, the country needed a narrative of modernity. It was a new moment of the country. So they wanted a modern perspective. So they wanted to erase all the bad things from the past, and now you must look at the future. So they chose a martyr, a white martyr who was against Black people's freedom in the country, and a minister decided to burn all the documents proving the slavery trade in Brazil. So if you are a Black Brazilian in Brazil, you can't find your records to know where you came from, your family name, your real family name. It's almost impossible to find out. Brazil is very big, and we need to narrow which Brazil we are talking about in this paper. We're going to talk about Pernambuco. It's a state in the northeast part of Brazil. It's a place where it hosted one of the first revolutions against Portuguese colonization in 1815. And we chose the director Ernesto de Carvalho for this paper. Ernesto Carvalho is a photographer, anthropologist, and documentarist raised in the city of Brasília, an inhabitant of Olinda, and a partner at the Vídeo nas Aldeias project, a project with the goal of supporting indigenous struggle through audiovisual resources. So we're going to talk about these two directors and how they fabulate. And I brought this quote, to succumb to realism is to give up hope, because reality is never the sum of our present. Rather, it is politics that makes some elements of the present visible, reality, while rendering others unseen, fiction. And why these two directors? And why these two films? I presented Razan al-Salah's film in the Arab Women's Film Festival in Brazil in 2019. And there, my friend, who is now my curator partner, Carol Almeida, she shared with me about this film by Ernesto de Carvalho, how both of them use Google Maps as a language the language for talking about land expropriation. And since I've watched the film, we strongly believe they can establish a very important dialogue about the use of maps, especially in Palestine. If you Google Palestine in Google Maps, you don't find. It is denied. By the second half of the 16th century and through all of the 17th, the world was totally mapped by European cartographers at their will. No one else on the planet participated. Their own territoriality was ignored and expropriated. Cartography was one of the main weapons of epistemic control and racial classification. Cartography and maps are a tool of oppression. Now I'm going to play the first clip, which is from Razan al-Salah's. 1 sec. So this film, Razan al-Salah's film, is a fabulation. She fabulates the return of her grandmother to Haifa as she looks for her son, which is Razan al-Salah's father. And Google Maps is the only way she can access Haifa. So, and for this fabulation, she uses archive with Google Maps, so she can show the change of that Google Maps witnesses. She researched for the location of the house where her father was born, and she found an archival image of this well. She couldn't find where her father was born, though. So she uses this and recreates this story. It is somehow timeless, and at the same time that she questions how this map witnessed all the destruction and the colonization. Working within aesthetic glitches, Al-Salah emphasizes her and her grandmother's reality of a displaced Palestinian history and present. Al-Salah recognizes that any future return or claim needs to be invented beyond the limits and silences imposed by the archive as a historical source of factual information. The claim to the future needs to be grounded in fabulating with a reference from the present. And now I'm going to play the other clip. Ernesto de Carvalho's film brings the false idea of neutrality to the map. It's important to say that this idea of Google Maps is a tool that we use almost all the time, and but what both films do, especially the Carvalho's one, is it brings. I'm going to talk about the colonial matrix of power. It's a term that Aníbal Quijano uses, and the author that we worked with brought as this structure, this colonial structure that colonialism is built and lives in. This structure has in one of its ideologies is that the system is something that it's away of us. It's not. It's something that what we are living, we can see from above. This power is something that's not tangible, and Google Maps is a part of this colonial matrix of power, because the map, we deal with maps, but we're not asked if this map is the one, if it was different before, how it was when it wasn't existed. We heard today this panel about reimagining territories, reimagining maps. A map isn't just a map above us. So Google Maps, when it photographs Haifa, when it photographs Olinda and other places, in other places, it's not just for photographing. It is witnessing the changes, the changes and the violence. So he photographs. He talks to this car in this film. This is the map. This is the car. At the same time that he shows places of the city where you can see police violence on the right, and on the left, land expropriation. He shows the city being changed over a few years through the lens of street view. And I want to finish with the colonial cracks. This idea of the colonial cracks. The colonial cracks are fissures of coloniality where the coloniality can happen. Are these small rooms where coloniality breaks and where we can act, where we can do praxis and the colonial praxis. And I've really liked that both films have Google Maps cracks, and it's a visual, the colonial crack. And they use, and to finish, they use similar aesthetic choices to discuss similar topics at similar times. We need to bring closer more experiences from the global south and look at them as not isolated and simple coincidences. Those films were made in a similar time, one from 2016, the other from 2017. So it's not, our experiences aren't isolated. That's it. Thank you very much.